Thank you very much. Well, first of all, a little introduction. These days, everyone speaks about AI and LLM and related things, and this is good. That's what we are supposed to do. Nonetheless, I will give you a little break in this because I will not mention AI or anything related once. I would like to step back a little and look at creativity, technology in more general terms. But first of all, I'd like to speak about the Bible, partly because I am a biblical scholar and partly because this presentation is loosely based on a book that I've just recently written that is on the interpretation of the first few chapters of Genesis. So co-creators in Genesis 1 to 3. In this presentation, I'm giving you three different interpretations. The first one, which I will call the positive interpretation, is probably the favorite interpretation of these biblical chapters of those people who are interested in creativity, technology, and in the theme of being a co-creator. And this interpretation basically says that being creative is practically the fulfilling of our God-given mandate, according to these biblical passages. Then I will say a few words about a different interpretation, which I call the negative interpretation, which is, in a sense, says quite the opposite. It says that these few chapters are very critical of human creativity and technology. And then finally, I will give you my interpretation, which I call the hopeful interpretation. So, the positive interpretation. First of all, we read that human beings were created in the image of God in Genesis 1. Of course, the precise meaning and significance of this term, image of God, is hotly debated, as you know. But when God says that, he is active, he is involved in creating the whole universe, which presumably suggests that being a creator is somehow part of this being in the image of God. When we create, then we are similar to God, whatever the precise meaning of this image of God is. So when we participate in creating something, then we kind of actualize this image of God. And Genesis 2, the next chapter, perhaps has even more to say about this theme of being a co-creator. There God plants a garden and puts the human being, Adam, into that garden in order to keep it, to preserve it, and perhaps even to develop it. And that was a young garden. The trees had to be grown, and so on and so forth. So that's, again, we can understand as an image of giving responsibility to the human being, inviting the human being to finish the creation started by God himself. Naming the animals is perhaps the most celebrated section in these chapters in terms of suggesting that the human being is a co-creator. There, God gives Adam the authority to name the animals. So God creates the animals one by one, leading those animals in front of Adam, and Adam could name the animals. In the previous chapter, God was creating and naming the elements of the universe. Here it is the responsibility of the human being to name. So again, we can see that this human being gets the authority to participate in the creation of God and even to complete that creation on God's behalf. And while Adam is doing that, he is displaying a mind-blowing level of creativity. According to a recent estimate, there are 9 million different species on Earth, and Adam presumably had to name all those 9 million species. Extraordinary achievement by Adam, and a tribute to human creativity. So, according to this interpretation, these passages suggest that humanity is invited to participate in the process of creation. We have the responsibility of completing God's creation, and indeed, this is how we fulfill human nature. This is our God-given mandate, being active in creation. So this is the positive interpretation of these chapters. But let me move on and say something about a negative interpretation. Well, first of all, that Adam, who we read about in these chapters, is not really a superhuman being with mind-blowing abilities. This Adam is very similar to animals. I mean, when God wanted to create a partner for Adam, God recognized that Adam is lonely, he needs a partner. He looked at Adam and he created the hippopotamus as a potential partner, which means that Adam, at least in the eyes of God, must have been somewhat similar to a hippopotamus, to an animal. And the naming of the animals, well, it perhaps is not such a big deal that Adam could name all those animals. And here, let me read a few lines from that book that I was working on recently. So in this book, I write, understanding this expression, every animal, in the light of modern scientific study of fauna, is probably an overinterpretation. A 10-year-old child knows the names of all the animals that matter to her without any extraordinary mental abilities. So the ancient writer, unaware of the uninterested in the bewildering diversity of animals over the globe, could loosely speak about an adult naming all the animals. In addition, Adam didn't have to remember all those names. The text nowhere makes a big fuss about Adam's extraordinary mental abilities, and it is not excited about the number or quality of names produced by Adam. Instead, as the main issue at that point of the story is finding a fitting companion for Adam, the point seems to be that through watching how Adam was naming the animals, God could study how Adam was reacting to them and thus determine which one is the most suitable partner for Adam. So, what I'm saying here is that the situation in that chapter is similar to the situation of a dog owner. You have a dog and you want to buy a dog house to your dog. What do? You take your dog to a shop where they are selling different kinds of dog houses, and you observe how your dog reacts to those dog houses. When your dog just walks by a dog house without noticing it, that's not good. But when your dog becomes excited about the dog house, that's the one. Similarly, God asked Adam to name the animals because he wanted to see how Adam was reacting those animals. When Adam looked at one animal and he said, okay, let's call it hippopotamus. Then God concluded that that's not good. But when Adam looked at one and said, wow, Eve, let's call it Eve, then God concluded, okay, this is the one. And that was the point of the whole exercise. It wasn't that God was inviting Adam to be part of the creation process or anything grand like that. No, God was just observing Adam's reactions. And in fact, in these chapters, the evaluative and decision-making abilities of Adam and Eve are not that great. The agency of Adam and Eve are not that great, you could say. In chapter 1, in Genesis 1, God is very active in evaluation and decision-making. We keep reading that God said that it was good, it was good, it was good, it was very good. Then in chapter 2, he continues, and in this case, he makes some negative evaluations. He recognized that it was not good for Adam to be on his own, which, if you think about it, is kind of surprising. You would have expected Adam himself to complain, to recognize that it wasn't good to be alone. You would have expected Adam to say to God that, God, this is nice, but something is still lacking. But it wasn't Adam, it was God who recognized. And then we read in Genesis 2:20 that the man gave names to all the cattle and to the birds of the air and to every animal of the field, but for the man there was not found a helper as his partner. The translation is slightly misleading here, the NRSV translation. I think it's better to translate it, but for the man, he did not find a helper as his partner. Now, who is this he? This he is God. So again, surprisingly, the text doesn't say that Adam couldn't find a helper for himself, but it says that God couldn't find a helper for Adam. So it seems that ultimately it was God who was making the final ultimate evaluation and who was making the decision, all the decisions based on Adam's reactions. But it was very much a situation of the dog owner and the dog. So this negative interpretation says that Adam was not massively involved in creation in these chapters. Adam's and Eve's contribution is very minimal, and real decision making, real creativity is on the side of God almost exclusively. Human beings, in fact, become creative and they start making decisions once they eat the forbidden fruit. Then they immediately realize that they are naked. They immediately realize that being naked is not good. And they start creating clothes on the basis of that realization. And in the following chapters, they invent musical instruments, they invent metalwork, they invent city life and all sorts of things. There is this big bang of creativity after eating the forbidden fruit. So according to this negative reading, evaluation, decision-making, creativity, like it or not, is a result of the forbidden fruit. So, so far I've described these two opposing interpretations, the positive and negative. Positive interpretation of these chapters suggests that creativity, creating technology within creativity is part of human nature. It is fulfilling the human mandate that we should be similar to God. The negative interpretation, on the other hand, says that, well, all these are the result of the forbidden fruit. I have a mixed reaction to these two different interpretations. The second one, the negative one, is something that I, as a biblical scholar, find more persuasive, if I'm honest. At the same time, this is the interpretation that I do not like. I would like to believe in the positive interpretation, but as a biblical scholar, I am not sure that it does justice to the biblical text. So I suggest a third interpretation, and at this time I recognize that I am running out of time, so I will just summarize it in just 1 minute in headlines. So apologies for the brevity. First of all, I think we should recognize that there were two trees in the Garden of Eden, and we make a mistake if we focus only on one of those two trees, the forbidden tree. Because there were two trees, Adam and Eve made not one mistake, but they made two mistakes. They made the mistake of eating from the forbidden tree, but they also made the mistake, and before that, actually, they had made the mistake of not eating from the permissible tree, which is a tree of life. So looking at the story through the lenses of these observations, this becomes a motivational story, which says that, dear reader, please do not make the same mistake. Don't be so much interested in the tree of knowledge, but be more interested in the tree of life. Don't make the same mistake as Adam and Eve. And within the canon, at least, providing a canonical reading, the tree of life, the tree that we should be interested in, is identified with wisdom in the book of Proverbs, famously. So this is a motivational story which says that don't be too much fascinated by creativity, by technology, because there is something which is even more important than that, and that is wisdom. And I would say the social context, the psychological context, the theological context within which we create, within which we use technology. And that tree of wisdom, that other tree, is that we should focus on. And sadly, we are still too much interested in the wrong tree. We are hoping that we do see the disadvantages of technology, but many of us believe, including myself very often, that yes, so this is dangerous, but what we need is more technology to solve the problems. But I'm afraid that this is a cautionary tale, not necessarily suggesting that technology is bad, but suggesting that there is something even better, and we should focus on that even better. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.